Hey, that's great. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know when you're watching this, but we are glad that you are joining us. Great intro there talking about justice, and we're in a series right now that talks quite a bit about that, and we can't wait to jump into more of it today. My name is Nick. Glad that you're hanging out with us, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. We're glad that you're carving out a little bit of time here, and you've stumbled upon the kind of weekly online gathering for the Pathways Church community. Good news is we're actually meeting in person today too, so there's some of us who are seeing each other live in real time in person today. But we're excited for those of you who are a part of our online group here as well to participate in what we're doing today as well. Now, a couple things. If you haven't been a part of this group for very long, or you're wondering kind of who this group is that you've stumbled upon, we do have our core values listed in the bottom corner of the screen there, but you can read up more about us on our website at findpathways.com, and we've got some kind of information about who we are on there. And yes, I know it's a little weird discovering what type of group this is when you're just reading something online, but maybe it'll just give you kind of a glimpse and insight into who we are. Another way we usually try to give people just an idea of who we are is just by a couple words. Cautious and curious. We are a cautious bunch, particularly around things like religion. By cautious, I don't mean that we go around wearing helmets on our head, or living in a bubble. We're cautious mostly about religion. Many of us have grown up in religious contexts, or we've been around religion, and we know that religion can be used for some very good things. But we've also seen religion be used in ways that's harmful or abusive to other people. And so many of us have either been affected that way ourselves, or some of our loved ones have, and it's caused us to kind of rethink what we think about organized religion. Now, that doesn't mean that we want to give up on God or on Jesus. Many of us have made a commitment to follow Jesus with our lives. We're really curious also about the Bible, about Jesus, about what it means to live a life of faith. And so we ask a lot of questions in this group. Just because we're cautious about some forms of religion doesn't mean that we have given up on Jesus. And so what we've discovered is that has kind of led us down a path where we ask a lot of questions and rethinking things, looking at the Bible in new ways. And so perhaps if those type of things interest you, this might be a good group for you. Now, what we're going to be doing here this morning, here momentarily, Billy, our worship leader, is going to lead us in some online singing, which, yeah, I know, it's a little weirder when you're online as opposed to when you're surrounded by a bunch of people singing together. But maybe just use this time to sort of reflect a little bit. I don't always just wake up just thinking about God. I've got pressures and things that I'm doing and things that I'm worried about and thinking about, and sometimes I'm just kind of spaced out needing my coffee first, and I sort of need just kind of a warm-up, just to kind of become aware of the fact that God is with me all the time. I mean, I know that, in here, I know that, but I sometimes just need to have a warm-up to be reminded that God is with me. And so maybe these songs over the next couple moments will be something that helps warm you up to that. You can pray, you can sing, you can just kind of nod your head along. Any of that is fine. And in between two songs, we have a little reflective video. And again, the whole idea is just to begin to waken us up this morning to the presence of God. And then after that, I'll be coming back and we will be continuing our series on the book of Ruth, the short story of Ruth. And then after that, we are going to carve out a little time at the end of this live stream for communion. And so if you want to do communion, if you want to take communion, you can take that. You'll just have to grab a couple things around the house. Maybe you've got some crackers or some leftover bread. Maybe you've got some juice or some leftover wine from the night before that you want to just pull out and have set aside. And you can take a time of communion today, as Billy will lead us in the song near the end. We want to start out this morning with one of those songs that Billy has been teaching us over the last couple weeks, one of those new ones, and I think we might even be singing it in person today as well, but it's a really fun song, Give You Praise, and so Billy's going to lead us in that, and then we'll get on with a whole bunch of other stuff for today. Okay, Billy, take us away.
weapon that silences the enemy. Let praise be a weapon that conquers all anxiety. Let it rise. Let praise arise. Sing your name in the dark and it changes everything. Sing with all we are and reclaim your victory. Let it rise. Let praise arise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, let faith be a song that overcomes the raging sea. Let faith be a song that calms the storm inside of me. Let it rise. Let faith arise. Let it rise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, this is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise you. This is what living looks like. This is what freedom feels like. This is what heaven sounds like. We praise you, we praise. We'll see you break down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. We'll see you bring down every wall. We'll watch the giants fall. Fear cannot survive when we praise you. The God of breakthroughs on our side. Forever lift him high. With all creation cry, God, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, we praise you. Oh, God, we give you praise.
Let us love, comes the invitation from the beloved community. A community following Jesus so long that defined their whole beings by it. Let us love little children. They encouraged each other as if this love was something that was yet unknown and needed to be practiced, like a baby carefully watching the footsteps of others until she finally discovers her own feet can move in this way. wobbly and imperfect, but still walking, still following in the way. Let us love little children, not in word or in speech, but as if our whole bodies are learning this new grace. Let us be bold in learning this new movement, for we will falter, and it won't be perfect, just as we are not perfect. Little children, it will feel new and awkward, and it should. It should feel strange to twist and turn our bodies into love's possibility, to learn how to love in the way of Christ, who is still trying to encourage us to love one another. Let this be what defines us now, in this moment. Not so that they will know that we are Christians, but so that we know who that God's love abides. God's love abides in me. God's love abides in you. I am in you, and you are in me, and this changes everything. That is our prayer right now, that we will come to believe enough that God's love abides in us and be so changed. O Christ, may it be so.
If my heart is overwhelmed and I cannot hear your voice, I'll hold on to what is true, though I cannot see. If the storms of life they come and the road ahead gets steep, I will lift these hands in faith, I will believe. I'll remind myself of all that you've done and the life I have because of your Son. 'Cause love came down and rescued me, love came down and set me free, and I am yours, I am forever yours. Mountain high and valley low, I'll sing, I'll remind my soul that I am yours, I am forever yours. When my heart is filled with hope and every promise comes my way, when I feel your hands of grace rest upon me, staying desperate for you, God, staying humble at your feet, I will lift these hands in praise, I will believe. I'll remind myself of all that you've done and the life I have because of your Son. 'Cause love came down and rescued me, love came down and set me free, and I am yours, I am forever yours. Mountain high and valley low, I'll sing, I'll remind my soul that I am yours, I am forever yours. 'Cause I am yours, I am down and rescued me. Love came down and set me free. I am yours, I am forever yours. Mountain high, valley low, I'll sing out, remind my soul that I am yours. I am forever yours. 'Cause love came down and rescued me. Love came down and set me free. And I am yours. I am forever yours. Mountain high, valley low, I'll sing out, remind my soul that I am yours. I am forever yours. That I am yours. I am forever yours. That I am yours. I am forever yours.
Hey, all right. I was watching TV this week. I mean, I watch a little bit of TV every week. It's the golden age of television. There's so much stuff on. I can't ever get to the end of it all. And I got all these streamers, HBO Max and Netflix and Disney Plus. There's a lot of stuff coming at me all the time, but it's this golden age of television. There's so much to watch. But sometimes I like to just still flip through the old channels, right? And just kind of see what's on. And this week, as I was flipping through the channels, I came across something that was on one of the channels. That old classic movie, Back to the Future. And I just had to stop and watch it for a little bit. I mean, don't you love this movie? I mean, it's an all-time classic. And when I was a kid, I had it recorded on VHS tapes. I mean, yes, remember those VHS tapes? We had to actually rewind a movie when we wanted to watch it again. And I probably rewound that VHS cassette tape enough times that it nearly failed. I mean, I just watched this movie over and over and over again. Awesome movie. In fact, this movie really made me want to skateboard. I bought my first skateboard because of this movie. And I wanted to ride my skateboard all the time. And I was super excited about skateboarding until my mom told me that under no circumstances was I to ever grab a hold of the back of a car and hitch a ride while on my skateboard. And that pretty much ended my love of skateboarding. But I love this movie. It's so fun. And I remember showing it to my kids, you know, when they were little. They love these movies. In fact, Peyton, when she was really little, she loved Back to the Future so much that when Tanya got pregnant with our son, Caden, before we had a name for him, Peyton really wanted to name him Marty McFly because she just watched this movie so many times. She wanted to name her baby brother Marty McFly, which now that I think about it, that was a missed opportunity. We really should have named him Marty McFly. Fantastic name. But the part about this movie that I'll never forget, the part that whenever it comes on, it just gets me right back to the Future, is that song that Huey Lewis and the News played in it called The Power of Love. You remember this song? The Power of Love. Just a fantastic song. In fact, I'd love to play it for you right now in case you don't know what it is. Let's just go ahead and play The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News. All right, play it, guys. Wait, what's that? Oh, I'm being told that under no circumstances are we allowed to play the song from Huey Lewis and the News. We can't play The Power of Love? Okay, I'm being told that if we play that song right now for you to hear it, that Facebook will shut down my entire internet for a month. All right, well, let's not do that. Can we just play like a clip of it? Can we just play like a few seconds of it without Facebook shutting us down? Okay, let's just play the absolute longest amount of this song that we can play before Facebook shuts us down. All right, here we go. The Power of Love.
That's the power of love.
Wait, that's it? That's all? That's all we get? I mean, we can't play any more than that? What's that? Oh, I'm being told that that was 2 seconds too long. Facebook may be shutting us down right now. Okay, fine. Well, we can't play the entire song of The Power of Love, but you know the song I'm talking about, right? I mean, just a fantastic song. Remember? Power of love is a curious thing. Makes a one man weep and another man sing. Change a hawk to a little white dove. More than a feeling, that's the power of love. Don't take money, don't take fame. Don't need no credit card to ride this train. It's strong and it's sudden and it's cruel sometimes, but it might just save your life. That's the power of love. Wait, what's that? I'm being told I should not ever sing this song in public again, or Facebook may also shut down my internet. Okay, fair enough. But that is a fantastic song. Don't you agree? I mean, that is an all-time classic. It's enough to make the movie all by itself. Great song by Huey Lewis and the News. And that is what we want to talk about today, the power of love. Now, we are in a series here on the short story, the book of Ruth, a series that we're calling Undocumented Love, Crossing Borders in the book of Ruth. And it's a story, really, this incredible short story, very short. You could read it in 15 minutes or less, probably. It's one of the greatest short stories ever written, just from a literary standpoint. But it's a story, really, about a family who experiences a lot of tragedy, because the power of love, it's strong and it's sudden, but it can feel cruel sometimes. And there's a lot of cruel circumstances that happen to this family early on in the story. It's a family that experiences famine. They don't have any food to eat, and so they become refugees in a foreign land. They have to move away to a new place because there's no food to eat where they're from. It's a family that not only experiences famine, but they experience death. All the men in the family die, and only the women remain. It's not just the father, it's both of the sons. There is a lot of death and grief and sadness here in the life of this family. But it's a family then that not only experiences famine and death, but also poverty. Because in a patriarchal society, widows are left as the poorest of the poor. And in fact, about the only good news is that somewhere along in the story here, the mother, Naomi, hears that the famine has ended in her hometown, and so she decides to move back. And she tries to convince her daughters-in-law, the two women who had been married to her sons who have passed away, she tries to convince them to go home to their families of origin, because at least they'll have some shot at having a life there. But really, one of them chooses to stay with Ruth, and with Naomi. Her name is Ruth. And so the two of them move back to Bethlehem. Naomi is going home. But it's just not the same home anymore. And before Naomi is going to discover the power of love, she's going to discover the power of something else first. That is the power of grief. You ever experienced that one? Have you felt the power of grief? Naomi does. And she's going home, but what she's going to find out here is that sometimes it's really hard to go home. Have you ever experienced that? Going back somewhere that you have previously been, and it sounded like a good idea when you set out to go home, but when you get there, you find out that it's not quite as good as you expected. Because when you get home, you discover that there are all these things back home that remind you of things that you'd rather forget. And these memories, they bring on grief. And grief is powerful. And this has to be especially true for Naomi, because the last time she was home, last time she was here in Bethlehem, life was pretty good. She had a husband. She had 2 sons. I mean, she had a life. She had a future. She had, dare I say, happiness. Everything back then seemed so sure and understandable. But now, things have changed. All that is gone. Nothing makes sense anymore. She's lost her husband. She's lost her son. She's lost her future. She's lost her life. And now she's home, and the memories of that previous time must come at her from every direction. Everywhere she looks, she's reminded of her former life, and each memory reminds her of everything that she has lost. You know, if you've lost someone important to you, you probably know that feeling. That grief that wells up from seeing the familiar things of the past. Maybe you just see someone's old clothes hanging in the closet, or you hear their favorite song, and the memory returns, and it hurts. See, grief is powerful. And the power of grief really leads Naomi here to kind of a state of depression. I mean, if we were to just stumble across Naomi's journal here, right? I mean, if she was just keeping a journal and writing in it, I think we might read something like what St. Augustine wrote about his friend Nebridius when he died. A man that St. Augustine called the half of my soul. And here is what he wrote about his friend after he passed away. He said, "My heart was black with grief. Whatever I looked upon had the air of death. My native place was a prison house, and my home, a strange unhappiness. The things we had done together became sheer torment without him. My eyes were restless looking for him, but he was not there. I hated all the places because he was not in them." Wow, what a powerful statement of grief. I hated all the places because he was not in them. Wow. That's the power of grief speaking, isn't it? That's Naomi. She is depressed. So much so that her friends don't even recognize her anymore. I mean, that's the kind of power that grief has. I mean, when you are struggling with grief, it will even change your appearance. I mean, Ruth 1:21, her friends meet her and they say, "Wow, you don't even look like Naomi anymore." And she explains it by saying, "Yeah, well, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty now." That's what the power of grief has done to Naomi. It's left her feeling empty. Just an empty shell of who she used to be. In fact, she doesn't even want to be called Naomi, her name anymore. She said, "The power of grief has been so strong, I'm not even that same person anymore. Don't call me Naomi." And we learned early on that the word, the name Naomi, it means pleasant. She says, "Call me now Mara," which means bitter. She's saying, grief has been so powerful in my life, I'm not even the same person anymore. Just call me bitter. The end of verse 21 in chapter 1 says, "Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." Wow. I mean, she's blaming God here, but Naomi is depressed. She's lost the love of her life. She's lost her sons. But what's more, she believes she has lost the love of God himself. That God no longer has any love towards her. That he has abandoned her. And the power of grief has overwhelmed her. Caroline Custis James, she says this in her book called The Gospel of Ruth. She says, "Judging from the evidence, the God she once thought loved her doesn't. And this makes no sense to her. She isn't a pagan idolater. She's a believing Israelite, one of God's chosen people, a faithful follower of Yahweh. Yet God, the God she trusted with her heart, the Almighty One she counted on to be there for her, has turned against her. Instead of loving her, he has become her enemy, and she hasn't a clue why. How do God's love and so much pain fit into the same picture? Well, for Naomi, they don't. And so because she cannot rid herself of the pain, she throws out God's love. Wow. That's the dark place of grief. You ever been there? You ever walked with someone who's been there in the dark place of grief? And the questions that come in that dark place, usually the question, why? why, God, would you allow this to happen? I mean, really, the dark place of grief is almost worse for people of faith than for people of no faith, right? Because here, I've been trusting that there's a good God and that he wants to do right by me. And so why would this God allow this to happen? How could God allow my life to come to ruin like this when I've been faithful? You see, those are the questions we ask in the darkness of grief. And it's okay to ask those questions. In fact, it's natural to ask why in the middle of pain. And I love that Naomi here models the honesty about these questions in her time of grief. She models it for us here. In fact, she's giving us a great model of what it means to wrestle with faith. Faith doesn't mean that you don't have any doubts or questions or wrestle with stuff. In fact, exactly the opposite here. What we see with Naomi is that it means being honest when you find yourself in the dark place of grief. See, that's the power of grief. But then Naomi experiences something else. That is the power of the unexpected. Now, last week we saw a part of the story that Naomi, in her dark place here, doesn't get to see. As those reading the story or hearing the story, we are privy to information that other characters in the story don't know. Naomi doesn't see what we saw last week. She doesn't know what's been happening. She's in a dark place. She's depressed. She is upset. But what she doesn't see is what happened with Ruth, what we saw last week. And Ruth, last week, she had gone out to do what would be the equivalent for us today of like dumpster diving. Something that was called gleaning. And so she went out into these fields owned by landowners, and she was picking up leftover grain that was left behind by the harvesters who had already gone through and picked. And in fact, it was a legal requirement in the Old Testament that landowners must leave these leftovers, these gleanings, for the poor. They could only harvest their field through once, and anything left behind was for the poor. But of course, they were very good at picking the field clean, and so there wasn't much left. And so Ruth is out there trying to gather what she can because it's her only option. They have no other option for food, but she knows that whatever she gets is not going to be enough. And so she has this really bold request. She asks the foreman in charge, she asks if rather than just coming along behind after they're all through and picking up the gleanings, if she can just join the harvesters and take what she needs. And the landowner, this guy named Boaz, shows up and he sees what has happened here. And this request by Ruth forces this landowner Boaz to wrestle with a problem of reality, because the letter of the law, the Old Testament command, says he must allow her to glean. But she has challenged the letter of that law and is instead challenging him to the spirit of the law, which is that if you are a wealthy landowner, you should actually provide for or feed those who are poor. And she forces this harsh reality on him that he could follow the letter of the law and she'd still go hungry and die. And she dares to ask him for more. And Boaz does more. In fact, a lot more. He serves her water, refreshment. He feeds her lunch. I don't know if you remember that last week. She didn't pack a lunch, union break time. He makes this big lunch. And in fact, she can't even eat it all. She's got all these leftovers she's got to bring home with her. And then he has her go ahead and work among his harvesters. And he even has them kind of hand her grain as they go along. And she ends up with an ephah of grain, which is nearly 30 pounds of grain, plus all of the leftovers from her lunch in one day. And now what's going to happen here is we have this scene with Ruth last week that Naomi doesn't see, and Naomi is just back home or wherever she is in her dark place, and now the experiences of these two women are going to collide, and it is a huge contrast, okay, as these two women collide. Ruth comes home very full. I mean, literally full. She's eaten this lunch that she can't even eat all of, and so she's bringing the leftovers with her, which is probably, not that she wasn't thinking of Naomi, it's probably just indicating that Boaz was giving her intentionally so much that she would take it home to share with Naomi. But she is coming home very full, but also very, fully loaded down with 30 pounds of grain, and she comes home and collides with the self-described empty Naomi. And Naomi is completely unprepared for what she sees. Ruth 2, verse 17. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. She threshed the barley she had gathered, and it amounted to about an ephah, right? An ephah is about 30 pounds. She carried it back to town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Now Ruth comes home that day, and she is very full, right? Loaded down with lunch, loaded down with everything that she has collected. She's got 30 pounds of grain with her, which is like 20 times, at least 20 times the amount that a regular daily worker would have gotten as a wage. And now empty Naomi here could never have possibly have believed that she would come home with this much. I mean, if she hadn't seen it with her own eyes. What happens here is completely unexpected for Naomi. But it's the power of the unexpected that affects her and changes her. You know, something unexpected like that can really have that effect, can't it? You ever been down, depressed, and then all of a sudden you saw something, maybe even something very small, but even though it was small, it was something so unexpectedly good that it just brightened your day. I mean, something so unexpected. I mean, you would never have even asked for this, but somebody did it. And in that moment, your whole countenance changed. And that's what happens to Naomi here. I mean, Naomi immediately brightens up with questions. I mean, she's been mostly wordless since they've been on the road from Moab back to Bethlehem. But we get here to verse 19 and notice she's all full of questions all suddenly, you know. Where did you glean? Where did you work, right? She's just kind of all questions, you know. She just cannot believe what she is seeing here. And there's actually kind of even a fun Hebrew wordplay here, because the word that we see here that she uses, the word ephah, which is a measurement of grain, is really a very similar word to the word where. So when she says, "Where did you work today?" You know, what field were you in? It's really a similar word that's used for ephah. They're spelled the same. They're pronounced a little differently. And so she's really kind of saying the same word twice, you know, because she just can't believe it. She just says, how is this possible? And we even catch a glimpse of blessing on her lips, where she says, "Blessed be the man that took notice of you." She says, this is so unexpected. This could only be because some man showed up and saved the day. Now, of course, we know what Naomi doesn't know. And we know in the story that it was Ruth's initiative, really, not Boaz's. It was Ruth's initiative that brought all this to be. But of course, Boaz played his role too. And so Naomi wants to know, who is this unexpected person who has allowed you to come home with this much grain? And Ruth tells Naomi his name, but I love how it's done here in verse 19. If you kind of look down there, she's asking, who is the one that took notice of you? But then in verse, we're missing it here. She says that it is Boaz, right? And she says it right at the end that it's Boaz who is the person who helped me today. And in that, it is just this huge bomb drop because it's almost the last word that she says. And it's almost like one of those Ryan Seacrest moments. She's like, and the man whose field I was in today was... And we'll be back right after the break. No, she just drops it right at the end of the sentence. And the man that helped me today was Boaz. And the impact that this has on Naomi is stunning. It is a transformative moment for Naomi. Look here in verse 20. Naomi, hearing it's Boaz, says, "The Lord bless him," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing kindness to the living and the dead. And she added, that man is our close relative. He is one of our guardian redeemers. Wow. This little unexpected development has Naomi coming alive again. The Lord bless him. I mean, she's been thinking God's been cursing her, and now all of a sudden she notices this blessing from God and wants to return it to Boaz. This is sort of it's like a moment of resurrection for Naomi. Mara has gone away. She's dead now. And Naomi has returned. Lips that were cursing are now blessing. Everything has changed. And there's an interesting phrase here in verse 20 where she says, the Lord bless him, referring to Boaz. But then she says, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. And that phrase, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead, it's pretty interesting, really. The first part's interesting, he, because it's sort of unclear in Hebrew who the he is referring to. Is it referring to Boaz, that he has not stopped showing his kindness? Because certainly Boaz has shown kindness. Or is it referring to God himself? And I think it's actually more likely God. I mean, that's her big concern. Her big concern is, doesn't God care anymore? Has God stopped showing his kindness, his faithfulness, his love to me? And it's though she sees what has happened with Boaz here, and of course it fits with Boaz too, but it's as though she sees Boaz living into this kindness, this faithfulness, this love, this generosity, and she recognizes in that moment that it is through Boaz, God being faithful. I love that she says that he has been faithful here. He's shown his kindness to both the living and the dead. And you wonder, who's that referring to? It's sort of hard to recognize here as well who she's actually referring to. The living and the dead. Is the living Naomi and Ruth? They're still alive, and the dead is to their husbands. And now God and Boaz are showing kindness both to the dead, respect to the dead, and to them. Or is it that Naomi sees herself as among the dead? Perhaps even Ruth too, as poor, vulnerable widows with no future ahead of them. Naomi sees herself perhaps as among one who was dead, empty, bitter, dead. And now she is coming back to life. But it's this middle part that is the reason this moment is so big for Naomi. Because she says, he has not stopped showing his kindness. And this word kindness here is sort of hidden in English. But this word kindness is the word that we've discovered already in this series, the word hesed. And hesed simply means love, but much more than that. It's translated here in our text, kindness. But Naomi here recognizes this as God's hesed, his love, his steadfast love, his mercy, his faithfulness, right? She is recognizing that here. He has not stopped showing his love. And so she realizes in this moment that God still cares for her. He didn't give up on me. He didn't abandon me. He's not actually my enemy. And it's this moment here when Naomi feels like life might just be possible again. You know what's happening? Naomi is beginning to feel the power of love. I can almost imagine her breaking into the Huey Lewis in the News song, can't you? That's the power of love, right? I mean, she just, all of a sudden, things seem possible. You know, we should probably stop here and talk about this word, chesed, or love. Chesed is a really hard word to translate into English, and a lot of its meaning gets sort of lost in translation. The problem is there just isn't an English word that fully captures the meaning of this Hebrew word. And so translators, they use a variety of words, like in the verse that we just read there in verse 20, it is translated kindness. He has not stopped showing his kindness. But other times translators translate this word chesed as mercy or loyalty. Many times we see it as loving kindness, sometimes as a steadfast love or unfailing love, or sometimes just love. And of course, it means all of these things, but there's no one English word that completely translates into. Now, we could go to all sorts of Hebrew lexicons to find out what this word really means and the nuances of it, but I really like how Carolyn Custis James explains the concept of chesed. She says it this way: Chesed is a strong Hebrew word that sums up the ideal lifestyle of God's people. It's the way God intended for human beings to live together from the beginning. The love your neighbor as yourself brand of living. An active, selfless, sacrificial caring for one another that goes against the grain of our fallen natures. Two parties are involved. Someone in desperate need and a second person who possesses the power and the resources to make a difference. Chesed is driven not by duty or legal obligation, but by a bone-deep commitment, a loyal, selfless love that motivates a person to do voluntarily what no one has a right to expect or even ask of them. They have the freedom to act or walk away without the slightest injury to their reputation, yet they willingly pour themselves out for the good of someone else. Wow, that is such a great description of chesed. A description that, when you think about it, it really applies most fully to one person, and that's Jesus. I mean, if you just kind of want to sum up what is chesed love, it's a Jesus type love. Chesed is really the gospel lived out. It's moving past the letter of the law to the spirit of the law. It's going way beyond what would ever be expected of you, giving of yourself sacrificially in order to care for another person, even though it costs you dearly. It's a type of love that's sort of hard to describe, isn't it? It's kind of hard to put a definition in words to it, but you know it when you see it. And that's why I love this story. It doesn't try to define love, chesed, for us like a dictionary. Instead, it chooses to show us what it looks like. Just as Jesus didn't give us a worded definition of love, but came instead and lived among us to show us. And that is what we see in the story of Ruth. Love being shown to us without ever being defined. And wow, do we see the power of love in this story. I mean, we see it early on in chapter 1 when Naomi is going home and she tries to send her daughters-in-law back to their family of origin. And it would, of course, be way better for Naomi herself if the daughters-in-law stuck with her, because she's very vulnerable anyway. So are they. But they might have some chance if they could kind of pal together. But even though it would be better for her to have them with her, she knows it would be better for them if she sent them away. And so she chooses to do what's better for them, even though it will cost her. And we catch a glimpse of the power of love. We see it again as Ruth defies the command of her mother-in-law, Naomi, to go home to her family of origin. She refuses to go. And the reason is because she knows it would be better for her to go home, but it would be better for Naomi if she stayed. And so she is going to choose to do what is best for Naomi. And we see there the power of love. We see it again last week as Ruth goes out to glean, right? Braving the dangers of that work where she is very vulnerable. Many people were abused and even raped out in those fields, especially poor widows who did not have a male to protect them. And yet Ruth is willing to go out and do whatever necessary to help her mother-in-law, Naomi. And we see there the power of love. I mean, once she gets out in that field, we see the power of love in Boaz and his decision to go beyond the law, what is actually just required of him, to go way beyond that and give Ruth an abundance of food to help her and Naomi, even though it is going to cost him a great deal. We see that Boaz is willing to help, and there we see the power of love. We're going to see it a lot more in this story as Boaz is going to go to further lengths and incur much higher costs in order to help Naomi and Ruth. I mean, this story just moves from picture to picture of people acting in selfless ways to help others, and that is the power of love. The story of Ruth is sort of like a photo album of these full color pictures of what chesed love looks like. And it might be hard to define, but it's not so much a feeling. What we discover is it is an action. It's hard to describe, but we know it when we see it. And Naomi now sees it. She's been struggling. She's been struggling with questions about the love and the faithfulness, the loyalty of God. She is in the darkest days of her life, struggling with how to make sense of her personal pain and her grief and her loss, and how to make sense of all that with this idea of God's love. And in the middle of that, rather than just in an audible voice, God calling down and saying, I love you, Yahweh starts to show her these pictures of chesed, faithful love, through the actions of others. And I dare say, perhaps it's more meaningful that way. You see, you can't really, truly be told what love is. You have to see it. And do you see it? Have you been wondering about the faithfulness, the goodness, the love of God? Maybe you've been in some dark moments in your life recently. Maybe you've been there with Naomi demanding answers from God. I know I've been there. Perhaps it's time to stop waiting for an audible answer from God. Stop waiting for some audible sound from heaven and start looking around for where God has been showing you chesed through the actions of others. And you might have to look close because sometimes it's so small. I mean, it was for Naomi. The first few things were so small she didn't even notice them. But now they're piling up and she's beginning to see it all come together. Do you need to see the love of God? Who around you needs to see it? Who can you show chesed to this week? You know, the whole idea with reading these stories is that we aren't just supposed to read it. We're actually supposed to enter it. We're supposed to become sort of, in a way, participants in it. And these people in the story, they make these conscious decisions to help others, even at great cost to themselves. And so we need to enter into the story with them and begin to ask these questions about ourselves. What about you? Who can you love at a cost? You know, whoever it is, that little act of love, it might change everything for them. Because Naomi has a resurrection experience here. I mean, her faith in God is recovered. And I think it's really interesting to notice here that she doesn't recover her faith in God by, going to a good apologetics class or something, or an emotional worship experience at church. She doesn't recover her faith in God because someone invited her to church. She recovers her faith because people start showing her love. There's no gospel presentation, just acts of selfless love. And through those acts of love, she sees Yahweh. Could it really be that easy? I mean, could that be all that's really required? That's so simple. You know, maybe we don't really need evangelism classes at churches, programs. If we really wanted people to begin to see God, maybe we just need to start loving people like Jesus. No strings attached. And that's the power of love. Huey Lewis says, it's the power that makes the world go round. He's right. And that's why you're here, isn't it? I mean, not because you have to be, I hope. I hope you're here because you find something so compelling about the love of Jesus. A love that cannot be stopped. It cannot be killed. A love that is more powerful than any other force on earth. You're here perhaps because you are drawn to the power of love. You don't need money. You don't need fame. Don't need no credit card to ride this train. It's strong and it's sudden and it might seem cruel sometimes, but it might just save your life. It's the power of love. Jesus, we come to you today so grateful for the kind of love that you show us. God, that you, though you have all the power, though you could demand everything from us, that you, God, come and demonstrate love to us, faithfulness to us, loyalty to us in a way that we don't deserve. Thank you for defining love for us that way, by showing us what love looks like. Thank you, Jesus, that you came, that you became one of us, that you had made a covenant with people that we could never live up to, so you just became a person and lived up to it to yourself. I mean, that is love, and thank you that you have shown us that. Thank you, Jesus, that you have come, that you have lived like us, that you allowed all the junk that we had sown into the world to do its worst to you. You allowed it even to kill you, but you triumphed over it at the cross. You defeated it. You came back to life and proved once and for all that the power of love is greater than any force in the world. And we are drawn to that love. Won't you perfect it in us? We love you, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. Let's go to communion, and then we'll come back with some announcements afterwards.
Together, who breaks the power? Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder? Who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder? The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, and I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is a failing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I thank for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, 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 yeah. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I thank for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me.
All right, thanks, Billy. We got a couple announcements here as we wrap up today. A couple things that are coming up that I want to let you know about. But before that, if you'd like to give, you can do that. If you want to help support the Pathways Church financially, you can do that by going to our website at findpathways.com/donate. And especially if you're online and you're not able to come and participate with us in person things, a way that you can really participate in what we're doing is by giving financially. So you can do that online if you'd like to, or you can even text in a gift amount to the number 84321, and we would appreciate that. But a couple announcements here and a couple other things for you in case you do want to join us in person on February 20th, which is coming up here next weekend. We are going to do a soup and bread and friends thing. We're going to get together and we're going to do kind of our church gathering thing. It's going to be a little different than it has been, a little bit like our birthday party a few months ago. And afterwards, we're going to have lunch together and have a good time. So if you want to join us for that, we'd love to have you do that. And that same Sunday, we are going to be handing out some new t-shirts. We've got some new t-shirts that we made up. Kind of goes along with our series here, talking about love, this idea of chesed and who do you love. And so we're going to be making those available. And if you want to pick one of those up, next Sunday is a great time to do that. Also, coming up in March, we're going to be starting up Theology Pub again. We're probably planting a couple of those. And if you hadn't been a part of Theology Pub before, we usually meet in a brewery or a pub somewhere, and we sit down, we order food, we order drinks. It's a real casual atmosphere, and we kind of unpack, deconstruct, reconstruct all sorts of things about where faith and culture meet, sometimes texts of the Bible. We talk about all sorts of theological ideas. You don't have to be like you don't have to have a master's degree in theology. We're just kind of talking about things together in a casual way, and it's a really good way just to meet some other people and to discuss some things that maybe you care about. Also, if you want to get more information about things that we are doing and you're not signed up for our newsletter already, I just want to encourage you again to sign up for that. You can message us on Facebook with your email, or you can email me. My email is on the screen here, and you can just say, hey, here's my name and my email, add me to the list, and we'll make sure that we get you the announcements that come out that way. Okay, that's pretty much it for this week. Hopefully you have a really great week. It's been a sunny weekend. A lot of good dry weather here lately, which has been really nice. And so I pray over you today a blessing that you would experience the deep love of God, that someone in your life this week would do something unexpected that would just demonstrate how much God loves you. And won't you then find a way to love others the same way? Okay, hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye.